A homeless man finds a locked box, but what's inside is hunting him. Before we start, join our YouTube family by subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, let's get into the story. The scream didn't sound human. It tore through the empty park like something ripped straight out of a nightmare. Sharp, desperate, echoing against rusted swings and broken benches. For a second, everything froze. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, then silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Daniel Carter's eyes snapped open. He jerked upright from the damp grass, his heart pounding so violently it felt like it might crack his ribs. His breath came in shallow bursts as he scanned the darkness around him. Nothing. Just the same abandoned park, same flickering street lamp, same skeletal trees clawing at the sky, and the same crushing loneliness. Daniel pressed a trembling hand against his chest. "Just a dream," he whispered, though his voice didn't sound convinced. But something about it felt wrong, too real, too close. He slowly stood up, brushing dirt and dried leaves from his worn-out coat. The fabric had long since lost its warmth, but he wore it anyway, more for comfort than protection. Around him, the park looked like a place time had forgotten. Faded paint peeled off the old playground. The swings creaked slightly, even though there was no wind. And the benches, his benches, were cracked, chipped, and barely holding together. This place had been his home for the past 6 months. Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his unkempt hair. Once upon a time, he used to wake up to alarm clocks, emails, and the smell of fresh coffee. Now, it was nightmares and cold air. Funny how fast life could collapse. He walked toward his usual spot, a bench tucked under a dying oak tree. A torn blanket lay folded on one side, along with a small backpack that held everything he had left in the world. He sat down heavily, staring at the ground. "You're losing it," he muttered to himself. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. Because that scream, it wasn't just in his head. It felt like a memory, or a warning. Daniel hadn't always been this man. There was a time when people respected him. A time when he had a home, a job, a life. He had worked as a financial analyst in downtown Chicago. Clean suits, late nights, numbers that made sense. Everything in its place. Until the day everything fell apart. It started with a file. Just one file. He remembered it clearly. The way his boss had casually slid it across the desk. "Take a look at these transactions," his boss had said, not even meeting his eyes. Daniel had nodded, thinking it was just another routine audit. But it wasn't. The numbers didn't add up. Money was being moved, quietly, carefully, into accounts that didn't exist on paper. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Then he realized it wasn't. It was fraud. Massive fraud. And when he brought it up, everything changed. "You're mistaken," his boss had said coldly. "I'm not," Daniel replied, his voice steady but his stomach twisting. "This is illegal." That was the moment his life split in two, before and after. Within a week, Daniel was fired. Within 2 weeks, he was blacklisted. Within a month, his bank account was frozen under investigation. And within 3 months, he was on the street. No explanation, no justice, just silence, like he had never existed. A sudden clank snapped Daniel back to the present. He froze. The sound came from somewhere behind the playground. Metal hitting metal. Slow, deliberate. Daniel turned his head slightly, his body instinctively tensing. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cautious. No response. He stood up again, his heartbeat quickening. The park wasn't completely isolated. There were roads nearby. But at this hour, no one came here. No one sane, at least. Another clank. Closer this time. Daniel swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to stay where he was, to ignore it, to survive by not getting involved. But something pulled at him. Curiosity, or maybe something deeper. He grabbed the small flashlight from his bag. It flickered weakly when he turned it on, barely cutting through the darkness. Probably just trash, he muttered, though he didn't believe it. Slowly, carefully, he started walking toward the sound. Each step felt heavier than the last. The grass grew thicker near the back of the park, overgrown and wild. Broken glass crunched softly under his shoes. Then he saw it. A section of the ground that looked disturbed. The dirt was uneven, freshly shifted. Daniel stopped. His breath caught. Someone's been here. He crouched down, shining the weak beam of light over the area. And that's when he noticed it. A corner of something metallic, barely visible beneath the dirt. His pulse spiked. No way! He hesitated. This wasn't his business. He should walk away. But his hands were already moving. He brushed away the loose soil, his fingers digging into the cold earth. Bit by bit, the object revealed itself. A box, old, heavy, and locked. Daniel sat back, staring at it. What the hell? The box was about the size of a briefcase, made of dark metal with scratches and dents covering its surface. It looked like it had been buried in a hurry, or hidden. His throat went dry. Who would leave this here? For a moment he just stared at it, his mind racing. It could be nothing, just junk. Or something valuable, something dangerous, something that could change everything. He reached out slowly, his fingers hovering over the cold surface. And then he heard footsteps behind him. Daniel froze. His entire body went rigid. The footsteps stopped. Right at the edge of the trees, someone was there, watching. A low voice broke the silence. You shouldn't touch that. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He turned slowly, his grip tightening around the flashlight. But the light was too weak. All he could see was a shadow, tall, still. And then the voice came again, calm but carrying something unsettling. That box doesn't belong to you. Daniel swallowed hard, his mind screaming at him to run. But he didn't. Not yet. Because something about that voice, it sounded like it knew him. And what happened next made his blood run cold. The shadow took one step forward and said his name. Daniel. Daniel's name hung in the air like a loaded weapon. For a second, he forgot how to breathe. His grip tightened around the flashlight as his eyes strained to make sense of the shadow standing just beyond the reach of the weak beam. How do you know me? He asked, his voice low, controlled, but there was a crack in it he couldn't hide. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch part of a face. A man, mid-50s maybe. Clean, too clean for this place. Sharp features, calm eyes, and a look that wasn't surprised to see Daniel here. That was the worst part. You've always been curious, the man said quietly. That's what got you into trouble before. Remember? Daniel's stomach dropped. That voice, that tone. It felt familiar in a way that made his skin crawl. I asked you a question. Daniel snapped, standing up now, putting a bit of distance between himself and the box. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly, studying him like a puzzle. Someone who knows what happens if you open that. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. He glanced back at the box, then at the man. Then maybe you should explain why it's buried in a public park, Daniel shot back. And why you're here guarding it like it's some kind of secret. The man's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Because it is. Silence stretched between them. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the dead leaves around their feet. Daniel's mind raced. Nothing about this made sense. A buried box? A stranger who knew his name. And that feeling that this wasn't random. You've been watching me, Daniel said slowly, piecing it together. Haven't you? The man didn't deny it. Instead, he took another step forward, now fully visible under the weak light. Well, Daniel, when someone stumbles onto something they shouldn't, we tend to keep an eye on them. A sharp pulse of anger flared in Daniel's chest. We? He repeated. Who the hell is we? The man ignored the question. His gaze shifted briefly to the box, then back to Daniel. You've already lost everything once, he said, his voice lowering. Do you really want to go through that again? Daniel froze. Those words hit deeper than anything else, because they weren't random. They were precise, calculated. How do you know about that? Daniel demanded, his voice rising. About my job. About what happened. The man's eyes darkened slightly. You think that was an accident? He asked quietly. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. Daniel blinked. What are you saying? The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward the box. That, he said, is connected to everything you lost. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. No, he whispered. But something inside him already knew. The numbers, the missing money, the accounts that didn't exist, the silence that followed. It wasn't just corruption. It was something bigger, something hidden. And now it was buried in front of him. Daniel looked down at the box again, his thoughts spiraling. What's inside it? He asked, barely above a whisper. The man's expression hardened. Something you're not ready to see. That answer only made it worse. Daniel let out a sharp breath, running a hand over his face. 6 months on the streets. 6 months of wondering why his life had been destroyed. 6 months of being treated like he didn't matter. And now the answers might be right here, buried in the dirt. Locked inside a metal box, he laughed softly. But there was no humor in it. You know what's funny? Daniel said, looking up at the man. I don't have anything left to lose. The man studied him carefully. Everyone has something left to lose, he replied. Not me. Daniel stepped closer to the box again. The man's posture shifted instantly. Tense now. Don't, he warned. Daniel ignored him. His fingers brushed against the cold metal. Last chance, the man said, his voice sharper now. Daniel paused, not because he was scared, but because something else was happening. A memory. That file. Those transactions. A specific number flashing in his mind. A code. He frowned, looking closer at the lock. It wasn't just a lock. It was a combination lock. 4 digits. His pulse quickened. No way! What are you doing? The man asked, stepping forward. Daniel didn't answer. His mind was racing now, pulling pieces together. That number. He had seen it before. Not in the file directly, but hidden. Repeated. Subtle. Like a signature. Step away from the box, the man said firmly. But Daniel was already moving. His hands reached for the dial. Click. The first number. The man lunged forward. Stop! Click. Second number. Daniel's heart was pounding so loud he could barely hear anything else. Click. Third number. The man grabbed his shoulder, but Daniel twisted away. One last number. Click. A soft mechanical sound echoed in the stillness. The lock. Released. Everything froze. The man's face changed instantly, from calm to something else, something dangerous. You just made a very big mistake, he said quietly. Daniel's hands hovered over the lid. Every instinct screamed at him to stop. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when he was this close. Slowly, he lifted the lid. At first, he didn't understand what he was looking at. Just papers, files, a small device. And then, his eyes locked onto a photograph. His breath caught. No. His hands started shaking as he picked it up. It was him, standing outside his old office building, from months ago. But he wasn't alone. There were 2 men standing beside him, men he didn't recognize, and written across the bottom of the photo, in bold red ink, were 3 words that made his blood run cold. Primary target, Daniel Carter. The world seemed to collapse inward. This isn't possible. His Voice barely came out. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he looked up at the man. But the man wasn't calm anymore. His expression had gone completely cold, detached, like a switch had flipped. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said. And then, from somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, more footsteps. Not one, not two, many. Surrounding them, closing in. Daniel's grip tightened on the photograph as his heart pounded wildly. Because in that moment, he realized the truth. This wasn't just about a box. It never was. And the people coming for him. They had been watching him all along. And what happened next would decide whether he survived the night or disappeared forever. The footsteps didn't rush. They advanced slowly, confident, controlled, like they already knew there was nowhere to run. Daniel's fingers tightened around the photograph, the paper crinkling under the pressure of his grip. His breathing turned shallow as he turned in a slow circle, trying to count them. 1, 2, 3. No, more. Shadows began to detach themselves from the darkness between the trees. Men, at least 5, maybe more, all dressed the same, dark jackets, clean lines, nothing accidental about them. They weren't thugs. They weren't random. They were organized, and they were here for him. Daniel took a step back instinctively, his heel catching slightly in the uneven dirt near the box. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused, because there was nowhere to go. "You should have listened," the man in front of him said quietly. Gone was the calm observer. Now he stood straighter, colder, like someone finally done pretending. Daniel swallowed hard. "You set me up," he said, his voice shaking, but not weak, angry. "The job, the investigation, all of it?" The man didn't deny it. "You were never meant to understand what you saw," he replied. "You were meant to sign off on it and move on." Daniel's chest tightened. "That wasn't accounting," Daniel snapped. "That was theft. Billions of dollars disappearing into fake accounts." "Not fake," the man cut in. A pause. Then slowly, "Unlisted." Daniel blinked. "What?" The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Off-grid funding channels, invisible to governments, invisible to regulators, invisible to people like you." Daniel's stomach twisted. "For what?" he asked. The man held his gaze. "For control." Silence fell heavier than before. Behind him, the men had formed a loose circle now, not rushing, not threatening loudly, just waiting, like professionals who knew the outcome was already decided. Daniel's eyes flicked between them, calculating, searching for an opening. There wasn't one. "So what?" Daniel said bitterly. "You destroy anyone who notices?" The man tilted his head slightly. "We remove variables." Daniel let out a hollow laugh. "Variables," he repeated. "That's what I am to you?" The man didn't respond, which was answer enough. Daniel looked down at the open box again. Files, documents, proof, real proof. Not just numbers on a screen, but physical evidence. His mind raced. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger, way bigger. "You buried this," Daniel said, his voice quieter now, more focused. "Why?" The man hesitated for the first time. "Just for a second." But Daniel saw it, and that was enough. "Because it wasn't supposed to be found," Daniel pressed. The man's jaw tightened. Things changed. Daniel's pulse quickened. "What things?" No answer. But now Daniel understood something crucial. They weren't completely in control. Not entirely. And that meant there was a chance. Small, fragile, but real. Daniel slowly crouched down again, his movements careful, deliberate. "What are you doing?" one of the men behind him said sharply. Daniel ignored him. Instead, he reached into the box again. The man in front of him took a step forward. "Don't push this further." Daniel pulled out the small device he had seen earlier. It was sleek, black, about the size of a phone, but heavier. His fingers ran over its surface. No brand, no markings, just one small port, and a faint blinking light. "What is this?" Daniel asked. The man's expression darkened. "Put it back." That was the wrong answer. Daniel's grip tightened. "This is why you're really here, isn't it?" he said, looking up. "Not the box, this." No one moved. But the tension in the air snapped tighter. Daniel's heart started racing again. But this time, something else mixed in. Clarity. Pieces were falling into place. "They didn't just hide money," Daniel said slowly. "They stored something, data." The blinking light reflected faintly in his eyes. "Everything," he added under his breath. The man stepped closer now, his patience clearly thinning. "You're out of your depth, Daniel." "Am I?" Daniel shot back. He stood up again, holding the device firmly now. "If this is what I think it is," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "this isn't just evidence. This is leverage." That word landed. Hard. Even the men behind him shifted slightly. The man in front of him stared at the device for a long second, then back at Daniel. "You don't even know how to access it," he said. Daniel gave a faint, dangerous smile. "No," he admitted. "But someone does." The man's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Daniel didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know yet. But he knew enough. Enough to understand that this device was worth more than his silence, more than his life, apparently. And if they wanted it this badly, then it was his only way out. "Here's what's going to happen," Daniel said, his voice steady now despite the chaos around him. "I walk out of this park. With this," he raised the device slightly, "and you don't stop me." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a quiet chuckle escaped the man. "You really think you're in a position to negotiate?" Daniel's heart pounded. "No," he said honestly. Then he glanced at the box, at the files, at the photograph still clutched in his other hand. And back at the man. "I think I'm in a position to make this very, very messy for you." Silence again. But this time, different. The kind of silence where decisions were being made. Calculations. Risk versus reward. The man studied him carefully, and Daniel held his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. For the first time in months, he didn't feel powerless. Then suddenly, one of the men behind him lunged. Fast. Too fast. Daniel barely had time to react. He twisted instinctively as a hand grabbed for the device, but Daniel pulled back, stumbling. "Get it!" someone shouted. Everything exploded into motion. Daniel turned and ran. Branches snapped under his feet as he sprinted blindly through the park, adrenaline flooding his system. Shouts echoed behind him, footsteps crashing through the darkness, closing in fast. Too fast. "They're gaining," he thought, panic rising. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. But he didn't stop. Couldn't. He clutched the device tightly, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Because it was. A beam of light suddenly cut across his path. A flashlight. "Stop!" a voice shouted from the side. Daniel veered sharply, nearly slipping on wet grass, his shoulders slamming into a tree as he forced himself forward. Pain shot through him, but he ignored it. "Keep moving. Just keep moving." He burst out of the tree line and onto the street. Bright headlights blinded him instantly. A car. Too close. Too fast. Daniel froze. Everything slowed. The sound of tires screeching. The harsh glare of light swallowing his vision. And in that split second, one thought cut through the chaos. This is how it ends. But what happened next was something he never could have expected. The world didn't go black. It snapped, like a glass reality shattering into slow motion. The car's headlights flooded everything in white as Daniel threw his arms up instinctively, the device still clenched in his hand. Tires screamed. The car swerved. And then, silence. Daniel opened his eyes. He was still standing. The car had stopped inches from him. His chest heaved violently as he stumbled backward, nearly collapsing onto the pavement. For a moment, he couldn't hear anything except the pounding of his own heart. Then the driver's door flew open. "Are you insane?" A woman's voice shouted, sharp and furious. Daniel blinked, still disoriented as she stepped out. Mid-30s. Professional. Focused eyes, and something about her presence felt different. Not like the men in the park. Not controlled. Not cold. Real. I didn't see," Daniel stammered, his voice barely working. Her anger faded the second she really looked at him, at his torn clothes, his shaking hands, the panic in his eyes. Then her gaze dropped to the device. Everything changed. Her expression hardened instantly. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice low now, controlled. Daniel froze. Behind him, the sound of footsteps breaking through the trees. Closer. Fast. He looked back. They were coming. "Please," Daniel said quickly, stepping toward her. "I don't have time to explain. They're after me." "I know," she cut in. Daniel blinked. "What?" She grabbed his arm suddenly and pulled him toward the passenger side. "Get in." "What?" "Now." There was no hesitation in her voice. No doubt. Just urgency. Daniel didn't argue. He jumped into the car, slamming the door shut just as the first of the men burst out of the park. "Go!" he shouted. The engine roared, tires spun, and within seconds, they were gone. Neither of them spoke for the first minute. Daniel kept looking back through the rear window, expecting to see headlights chasing them. But there was nothing, just empty road. The woman drove fast, but controlled, her eyes scanning every mirror, every turn. Finally, Daniel found his voice. "Who are you?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a badge, flashing it just long enough for him to see. "Federal." Daniel's breath caught. "You're—" "Yes," she said. "And if you're holding what I think you're holding, then you just walked into something very big." Daniel looked down at the device in his hand. His fingers tightened around it. "I think I already did." She glanced at him briefly. "Name?" "Daniel Carter." Her grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. "I know who you are." Of course she did. Everyone connected to this knew him. "You were flagged 6 months ago," she continued. "Internal audit, disappearance. No trace after that." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, that sounds about right." She studied him for a moment. "You weren't supposed to survive that." Daniel turned to her slowly. "Funny," he said. "Someone else said something like that tonight." Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with understanding. "What is this?" Daniel asked, lifting the device slightly. She hesitated. "Then, it's a ledger." Daniel frowned. "For money?" She shook her head. "For everything." He didn't understand. She glanced at him again. Transactions, names, operations, locations, payments, deals. That never officially happened. Daniel's stomach dropped. "All of it?" "All of it," she confirmed. A chill ran through him. "That's not just evidence," he whispered. "No," she said. "It's exposure." Daniel leaned back in the seat, trying to process it. "This could take them down." Her jaw tightened. "It could burn everything." "That hit differently." Daniel looked at her carefully. "You don't sound excited about that." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she took a turn, sharp, precise, before finally speaking. "Because when something this big collapses," she said quietly, "it doesn't fall cleanly." Daniel stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means innocent people get buried with it." Silence. That wasn't what he expected. He had imagined justice. Clear, simple. Expose the truth. Take them down. But now, it didn't sound so simple anymore. The car slowed slightly as they approached a quiet, empty street. She pulled over, turned off the engine, and for the first time, looked directly at him. This is where you decide, she said. Daniel frowned. Decide what? She nodded toward the device. What you do with that? Daniel stared at it. His entire life destroyed. Everything taken from him. His name, his career, his future, all because of what was inside this. And now he had the power to expose it, to destroy them, to make them pay. But at what cost? He whispered. He thought about the people behind those hidden transactions, the unseen consequences, the chaos she mentioned. He thought about himself, about who he had become, and who he still wanted to be. His grip on the device loosened slightly. They ruined my life, he said quietly. She nodded. I know. They deserve to be exposed. Yes. But, Daniel's voice faltered. He looked up at her. I don't want to become like them. That was it. That was the line. The moment everything shifted, she held his gaze for a long second. Then, slowly, she nodded. Then we do this the right way. Daniel frowned. There is a right way? A faint, determined look appeared in her eyes. There is, if you're willing to disappear again. Daniel's heart skipped. What? She leaned forward slightly. Witness protection. Full extraction. New identity. You testify when the time comes. Daniel stared at her. Another life. Another disappearance. Another chance. Or he could walk away right now. Take the device. Sell it. Leverage it. Finally. Win. The choice sat heavy in his hands. Power or integrity. Revenge or justice. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled slowly. When he opened them again, his answer was clear. Do it, he said. She nodded once. No hesitation. Then she reached for the device, and for a split second, Daniel almost didn't let go. Because in that moment, that small piece of metal wasn't just evidence. It was control over everything that had happened to him. But then he released it, and just like that, the weight lifted. Not completely, but enough. The woman started the engine again. From this moment on, she said, Daniel Carter no longer exists. He looked out the window as the car began to move. The city lights blurred past. The park, the box, the past, all fading behind him. But something inside him had changed. He wasn't running anymore. He was choosing. And as the car disappeared into the night, Daniel didn't know what his new life would look like. He didn't know how long it would take, or what it would cost. But one thing was certain. The truth buried in that box was about to shake a world that believed it could never be touched. And somewhere, far behind them, the people who thought they controlled everything were about to realize something terrifying. They hadn't buried the secret deep enough.